Another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 309 of the Health Detective Podcast. Going to be a good one today. I see someone had already commented, waiting for the live stream, saying, will this be available to watch at a later time? Indeed, it will. So anytime we're streaming to YouTube or Facebook, we don't actually take it away afterwards. So it automatically will be sitting on our YouTube or Facebook. Anywhere that you're watching this right now, you'll be able to replay it and go back immediately after we're done the live portion. So that's true for any of the lives that we do. And then if anyone has any confusion on the audio side, the audio versions of these podcasts are always released, about a week and a half, 2 weeks later on either Monday or Thursday, our release dates. Our release dates for now, we're going to 3 a week mid-March, but right now it's Monday and Thursday still, as it has been for the past few years. And so Allie will be on one of those. Now, I will read the bio here and we'll jump into this today. This is always a super popular topic, I think in general, but especially in the functional health space. This space is so saturated with women, right? I think women are just, one, more aware of their health and want to take care of it. And two, there's legitimate statistics backing up that you guys kind of get hit with more stuff. I mean, you're 7 times more likely to be diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, which is absolutely wild, right? So, and I think infertility is just kind of naturally, us guys don't want to believe that about ourselves, right? So the women are the one that are more proactive about this. So Allie Parsons is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner who specializes in women's health, ranging from infertility to digestive concerns. Her background includes her degree in food and nutrition from Samford University, multiple holistic certifications, and her experience in clinical and personal nutrition at a local wellness center in her town of Birmingham, Alabama. Within her years working as a nutritionist, she assisted in the development of Cooking Well, a nonprofit for low-income women that provides nutrition education and cooking lessons to feed their families well. That's actually really awesome. She also worked for 2 years as a food and garden ministry coordinator in downtown Birmingham, utilizing hydroponic and community gardens to alleviate the needs for healthy food access in low-income areas, many of which are ongoing today. As of 2023, she launched Offbeat Holistic Nutrition, Beat spelled B-E-E-T, just so you know, with which she performs functional lab testing and offers nutrition coaching to women looking for deeper health answers. She and her husband live on their small homestead where they sell eggs from their 30 chickens, grow organic vegetables, and adventure with their dog, Hank. You guys are like one step ahead of my fiance and I. That is freaking awesome.
Really? Oh,
Allie,
that's awesome.
yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I'm such a fan. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Sweet. Well, then you already know where I'll go with this line of questioning, because people do not get into the space by accident, typically speaking. Usually there is something in their own health or something in the immediate families or like close friend circles' health that leads them to this. So I'll be bold and guess that you've had some health symptoms. So what did those look like and when did they begin?
Yeah, so I kind of have a long story and a short story. The short story for myself is that I was diagnosed with PCOS in early teen years, and the options presented to me were, of course, birth control, metformin, and that was it. Pretty much no help outside of that. Around the same time, though, I was a competitive gymnast. Stress levels were through the roof. I was a really high achiever in school and looking forward towards, really rigorous education and competitive sports and all the things. And we lived off of frozen pizza and toaster strudel and cinnamon toast crunch, to name a few. And my sweet parents, who were just the best, but they were young parents. My mom was getting her PhD in psychology while I was in elementary school. And then my little sister was, a handful, and she's the best, but she had her own slew of health issues, and we just knew nothing. Like, it was just survival mode. It was go, go, go all the time, and just, eating the standard American diet. So around the same time I was diagnosed with PCOS, hormone issues, my little sister actually was diagnosed with asthma. And that just turned into a whole slew of complications. So she was hospitalized for pneumonia for about a week and was put on repeat antibiotics, which now looking back, I'm like, oof, this was the start of a lot. And years later, then just kept getting new diagnoses like mast cell disorder, if you're familiar with that. It's an autoimmune disorder. tons of different food allergies that were anaphylactic shock causing. So, the hospital had to come to our house, and all these things started happening. So my little hormone issue seemed like pretty minimized on the side. However, it was affecting my life substantially. And then just by the grace of God, with her issues, my mom really was like, there has to be another way. There's got to be another way other than these endless medications and medical route. And she just pursued a functional medicine doctor, which at the time, which is about, I was trying to think how time length, maybe 15, 20 years ago. No, not 20, 15 years ago. She found a functional medicine practitioner, which was just really rare in our area, and still is, to be honest. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and there's just not a crazy big functional community there. And she found somebody that just really took a full body perspective at both me and my sister, and really then our whole family. And my mom did a complete, 180 change, and we looked at diet, and we looked at rest, and we looked at stress levels. And in that, I just found the power of nutrition to heal both me and my sister. And just, from that, I found complete healing of my hormonal imbalances. And then my sister is still kind of, she's, a lot more careful than me and still kind of in the healing journey, but so much better off than she was, not on any medications. She went to college and could eat in the cafeteria, which was a huge thing for her. So, all that being said, going into college, I just already had that background and knew what I wanted to study. And I just was so passionate about nutrition. So pursued a nutrition degree. And I did actually start with nutrition and dietetics, but in that found that dietetics world was not for me. And I never wanted to do clinical nutrition. I didn't want to do public health. I wanted to do what I had seen witnessed, like that functional perspective. So out of college then, I actually pursued a different holistic certification. And then roundabout many years of different things you heard in my bio, like all the different things I've done, kind of came back to wanting to work one-on-one with individuals and do that coaching, and found FDN, and just found, I agreed so much with every aspect of the mentality and understanding that the whole body is a complex system of parts, and not just, you can't just, pigeonhole one little thing. And was really excited about the lab testing too, because I had done many of those labs throughout my journey of health myself. So it was just a perfect fit, and it's been great ever since.
That's awesome. So you guys had like a very early influence with this stuff. Obviously knew this was what you wanted to do. That's always interesting. I'm curious if you even remember, like, what was the mindset when you, especially, and your sister were younger and you started to deal with these things? Because I know there's kind of two routes. Some kids almost just, because I was there myself at one point, some kids almost just accept this as normal. It's the only thing that they know. And hey, I'm just going through this stuff. And some are deeply concerned about it. So what did you guys have perspective wise at that time? Did you think this was like, oh, hey, just bad luck? Or what were your views on the health issues?
Yeah, so I remember as a kid thinking, why am I always sick? Like all of my friends would be completely fine, and then I would be out of school, for every other week. It felt like I had the new virus or new cold or something. And I remember that was the first time I was like, this isn't normal. And that was in elementary school. And then in high school, especially when I was still like competing in sports and like wanting to be an athlete, and realizing my body was just not responding well, I think I realized like this isn't normal too. And my sister, I think she would have a totally different perspective, and her story is really cool, but she also felt like this is not normal. And I think as a family, we were just like so at our end with medical lack of answers that it was like, okay, we felt this is normal for a long time. What can we do to change it at this point? So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for
When
that.
did, yeah, that makes sense. When did you end up finding FDN in terms of like time frame? Like, was this like the last couple of years? Because I think if I saw the bio correctly, this is a relatively recent graduation. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've actually only been in private practice now for a year,
Nice.
in April, so not even a full year. But I had found it, I want to say about 2 years ago. And again, I was practicing already as like a health coach. With a different certification, and had just been kind of looking and listening to different FDNs that I found on social media, and had done my research on you guys, and then just kind of was waiting to see, all right, does this feel good? Am I really willing to commit to this? And yeah, I just saw only good things. It was like a long time of kind of just watching, listening, praying about it, and it just felt really right. So yeah, it is newer.
We don't have to mention the name of the other certification because I don't want to paint it in a bad light, but sometimes people, this is true for myself, ended up coming here because of feeling that they needed more. Now, there's also another group, they're going to pursue certifications for the rest of their time on this earth because they just love that type of thing. So that's totally normal as well. I'm curious, which one of those do you resonate more? Was it just, hey, I'm never going to stop learning, which it does seem to apply to you, or two, like, hey, I feel like I need something more to really serve people at the highest level in this one-on-one setting?
Yeah, I think I needed more. So, what's interesting too is since I had the nutrition degree and I still felt like I needed more, like I really wanted to learn how to do, especially the lab testing, to dig deeper and just to see, results on paper. Like I could, interpret a lot from symptoms, and especially I was attracting clients, which I know we're going to talk about today, that were hormonal, and I could recognize a lot of what I dealt with myself, and pair that with my nutrition background to kind of get to an end goal. But what was so exciting to me about FDN was the education on the lab work and understanding how we can pull apart all these different layers, just at a really like in a scientific and data driven way.
Yeah.
And I think that was the game changer for me with my practice. I mean, this past year, my company just blew up because I already had kind of a reputation of working with these clients, but the people that were hesitant about, will this work for me, going into now working with me, they expect results. Like they expect to see change on paper, and have like concrete evidence of what they're doing is not working or working, which I think was a huge game changer.
It's so cool. I don't do this anymore as of recent, but I used to do some kind of like course enrollment calls basically for
Mhm.
FDN. And as a consumer, like even when you were looking into FDN, the last thing you want is someone that's overly excited on the other end of the phone
Yeah.
because you think they're trying to push into something. But my gosh, man, when I hear people already have like some type of practice or business, even if it's not a huge amount of clients, but if they've taken another certification and figured that out, I'm like, guys, this is going to work so well. If you plug this in, this is just a system. The only hard part about FDN, in my opinion, is the business side if you're not familiar with that.
Yes.
If you've
Yeah.
already figured out how to work with clients otherwise, you add this in, that's a no-brainer. It works very well.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it was definitely like the missing factor that I needed.
Oh, we got someone saying, you're literally telling my story. I just passed FDN this morning. Nice. Congratulations.
Congrats.
We got Holistic Health Center. I'm not sure what your actual name is, but congratulations. That's awesome. So I want to obviously talk about the clients that you started to attract, like you said, these hormonal
Yeah.
ones, different issues. So when you were, I guess I'd want to word it this way: what were you advertising as? Like, what did you have on your website? What did you say that you did? And then what did you actually see that you were finding in the people that came to you?
Yeah, so what's really interesting, I actually started off right out of college working under a chiropractor in a chiropractic wellness center. And so I saw literally anybody and everybody that came through there. I wasn't advertising myself, but what's interesting about, I think, anybody's practice is that the word spreads. Like referrals started coming from the people that I just really clicked with. And it was people like me. I clicked with women who were just tired of medical answers saying that they just had to be on birth control for the rest of their lives, people who were really just struggling with hormonal imbalance. And then that kind of led into, I didn't initially really work with many people for fertility, but when you start working with people who have PCOS or endometriosis or hormone imbalance, eventually they want to have a baby sometimes. And that leads into, it's also connected. And so it was really just by word of mouth that became my niche. I worked with everybody, and I so thankful for those years of like kind of getting a lot of experience and well-rounded application of what I learned. But eventually my schedule became full of all the people that had heard that's kind of, who was really finding success with me. So it just snowballed from there. And so then when I did the FDN certification, I decided that's actually really what I wanted to promote
Mhm.
and focus on, and not open it to everybody, because I think there's some people out there that can do other things better than I can, for sure. And you can bog yourself down in trying to do too much. So I felt like there was a big enough audience in the hormonal and infertility realm that's exactly what I put on my website. I shared my story about PCOS, and just had a lot of client testimonials from the past. And so it was just a really easy transition.
Yeah, I love that perspective and how you manage the business in terms of like, I know that there's people that do things better than me out there. I take this exact same approach where uh, off the top of my head, like if I know the person's coming in with a history of like long-term chronic Lyme,
Mhm.
it's not that I can't learn it. I'm capable of it. So are you. But
Yeah,
for me, I have so many FDNs that I know specialize in this. They know all the little co-infections, all the things to look for. I'm like, all right, I'm so glad we got on this call. I'm going to send you over here because,
exactly.
I
Yes.
just know that that person can serve you at a higher level. So it's actually really appropriate and healthy to have a specific audience that you serve. Because guess what? If you start sending people that come into you to other people, then they send back. Everyone
Exactly.
wins. The client gets served at the highest level. We win as practitioners. That's a good way to do business.
Yes.
Um, so with these people, as they're dealing with infertility, they're dealing with PCOS, endometriosis, there's a lot going on. What did you start to realize was some of the causes of this? Because I know at FDN, there's a million things that can
Yeah.
contribute to these, but I love to know, like, if I came into your practice and I'm like, hey, well, I want to know, why did this even happen to me to begin with? Why is this happening to all my friends if I'm a woman? What is your perspective now? Like, why do you think this happened to you and all these other women out there in the world?
Yeah. So I think you're dead on that there's so many different causes. And I do think I'm very, very careful at never promoting just one thing that has caused all these things. I think there's multiple factors. I really run my practice like the FDN model teaches to look at all aspects. So look at diet, look at rest, look at exercise, look at sunshine is a big thing for me that I think about a lot. Being outside, especially living on a farm, I just watch nature happen before me. And I actually share a lot about what I learned from watching my chickens who have a daily window of fertility, actually, with their egg production every day, and share a lot about how their environment and their stress levels, being outside, seeing the sun actually really affects. So all those different aspects, kind of what we call the dress model, I really utilized in my practice and didn't call it dress until I did FDN, but was already sharing a lot of those same things. And then there's a lot of different crazy factors that are happening in the world too. I think we're highly over medicated, and I'm not anti medication at all, and I'm not anti medical world at all. But I do think that most of the women that I work with that have been struggling with infertility for a long time at some point have been medicated to stop their ovulation completely. And that connection between the pituitary gland and the ovaries has been disrupted. And I focus a lot on kind of that restoration. So kind of post-birth control, if we're being frank. But so that's a huge factor. I also think just our modern day lifestyles that are focused on high stress, caffeine, even like nowadays modern workouts for women that are kind of like training for battle, like high intensity interval training, CrossFit, things like that, in a hormonally wrecked or fragile state can actually really promote even more stress in the body. So we're looking at all these factors of stress. I also mentioned in my bio that I work with women with digestive issues. That goes hand in hand with infertility too, and which is why I that's still part of my niche in my opinion. But gut health is so huge with fertility, and so if we have this internal stress happening, like overgrowth of bacteria or fungus or yeast or parasites, and lack of beneficial bacteria, which is we know is up to 80% of our immune system, then all of that internal stress is actually causing a lot of issues with hormones as well. So that's a very long answer to say multiple root causes, but if you were to come to me as a client and say, this is something I'm struggling with, we'd look at it all. So we
Yep.
would look at gut health. We would look at, I do a lot with hair tests, mineral testing. I look at methylation factors with the organic acids test. I look at, of course, hormones with the stress and hormone saliva panel, which is wonderful for seeing steroidal, DHEA, cortisol balance, and your sex hormones all in one, which I think is a big piece that many people miss out on. So looking at the full body and then asking a ton of questions about what your lifestyle looks like if we fix all these things, in the gut, but yet you're still not sleeping and you're drinking caffeine and only eating one meal a day, how far are we going to get,
Yeah.
so all of it.
Yeah, and I'm excited to break some of these down a little more. I think one way, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think one way to summarize all this, way oversimplified, but people, I think especially the women out there that really, this has to be a majorly emotional thing, I'm guessing. Like if you kind of have this time limit in your head of how long you could even have kids. And if that's something that you really desire to do, which it seems like the majority of women desire to do, then I imagine that can be very scary and very emotional. That's causing stress in and of itself. So kind of the simple way to think about this is when the body is under too much stress for whatever reason, right? Whether it's the toxins, whether it's literal stress. I shouldn't say literal because it is all stress, but I mean the classic forms of stress that we think about, fighting with a partner, not being in a good household, whatever it is.
Mhm.
The body is saying, well, hey, this doesn't seem like a great time for me to be vulnerable and create
Right.
another human for 9 months. Like that's a pretty
Mhm.
big process. You know what I mean? So I think that's the way to think about it. Now, what we do as FDNs is we go way beyond the surface of, all right, hey, you know your life isn't good right now. Maybe there's some things going on that we can work on there. Let's figure out all the things that have happened in your body throughout these years that you've been alive,
Right.
that have now accumulated or just gone in the wrong direction. And we can identify those stressors. I don't want to just pinpoint one, but I love what you said about the overexercise thing.
Yeah.
They just did a segment. There's a thing that Dr. Aaron Gonshore, CEO of
Mhm.
Fluids IQ, Reed does this with him, and then Brendan Vermeyer. It's Science Matters on our YouTube channel, so you guys can check that out. But they just showed this study that said people who were sedentary had about the same kind of health status as people who jogged way too much. And then the people who only jogged like occasionally actually did the best out of everyone because it's
Wow.
just too much. And
Yeah.
we know marathon runners have a life expectancy in their late 50s. Like this is, it's
Yeah.
serious stuff. It's pretty bad. The average American's still living to 70, and think about what we have going on.
Yeah.
So with that said, when you started adding in these labs, I
Mhm.
know that there's never going to be just one cause, and I'm not suggesting that, but I find it so cool when someone has a specific niche and then they're doing this similar labs all the time. They start to notice patterns. So you've already
Totally.
kind of alluded to some of them. What are some of the common things that you see going
Yeah.
wrong on the labs with these women that you're working with?
Yeah, so typically on the actual hormonal labs, we'll see a really consistent pattern of depletion. So depleted cortisol. So a lot of times there's like this huge trend on social media that's like you probably are running on high cortisol. When people finally make it to me when they've been struggling with infertility or hormone imbalance, they're actually they still think they might be running on high cortisol, but we know what happens in this exhaustive state in the body. The body start trying to protect you and says, okay, enough is enough. We cannot keep running on stress. And it stops giving you that hormone. And that's typically when I see clients is they're in this like flat line curve of exhaustion. And that's kind of that starting like top hat of all these hormone, cascades. So then that's the first thing we see. That also is going to go hand in hand with that low DHEA typically. So DHEA being that rest and digest hormone has to be in right balance with cortisol in order to then even get to that next step of those sex hormones. So progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, which I think is a big thing that people never realize. Like when they go to their doctor and just get tested for progesterone, they're missing all the things behind that. So typically my clients are also going to be very, very low in progesterone, which would signify anovulation or poor ovulation, which of course is the main thing we have to focus on when we're talking about conception. And so that's a big trend. I would also say I see a huge trend of estrogen dominance. So crazy high estrogen or even low estrogen on a lab, but symptoms would indicate estrogen dominance, which is a whole complex thing, but typically rooted in poor detox pathways. So when I would see that, I would then focus a lot on what we were talking about, gut health. We find out that the gut's usually a whole mess of issues. They're not having a daily bowel movement, or they're having constant diarrhea, or it's back and forth. So hormone is not, excess hormone is just kind of staying stagnant in the body. That also ties in with liver health. And to be honest, my most success comes from when I do kind of what I call a liver cleanse, which sounds, I hate the word cleanse because people have this connotation of like starving.
Do it
That's
once and then.
completely opposite of what I do. It's more actually adding in a ton of liver supporting foods and some liver supporting herbs to kind of get excess stale hormone out of the body, open up these detox pathways, and then actually we see huge success with kind of rebooting ovulation from there. So opening up the detox pathways, helping out hormones, it all goes hand in hand. But that's typically those patterns I would see is kind of like stagnation, feeling stuck in the body with and all the detox pathways, and then depletion in the hormones.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned before you thought that the digestive issues often go hand in hand with all this stuff. So one of our foundational tests at Functional Diagnostic Nutrition is we look at a GI map, and that if you listen 5-10 years from now, we'll continue to update the technology as we believe that there's better and better stuff because there always will be. But that one I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah.
I think it's actually kind of hard to say, at least in my practice, it's hard to say that there's just one thing that comes up more often than not, but I'll bite. Like, do you find that there's typical markers that are off on that test in
The GI
particular?
map.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So I would say I actually look first. So it's a huge report if you've ever seen a GI map, but the last page is actually my favorite, where we have the intestinal health markers. That's actually where I see the most trend. And I look specifically at fat digestion. So that's steatocrit marker, as well as elastase for protein breakdown. And those two markers, I mean, there's so many patterns I could talk about. Also, like low beneficial bacteria, probably a lot of overgrowth of bad bacteria or fungus or yeast also. But those two markers for fat and protein digestion are substantial in my mind when it comes to hormonal imbalance and infertility. And I think the reason is that we have to remember cholesterol, or fat, is actually the parent hormone of all of our hormones. And so if that woman is not actually, she might be eating fat, but if she's not digesting or breaking down fat well, we're not going to have a chance at producing healthy hormones. It's actually going to be causing inflammation in the body. And a lot of times too, so I do think fat is now becoming more of a less of a scary thing. I think for older women, there's this whole movement of being afraid of fat, and I think that's finally changing. But I do get a lot of women in my office that are still kind of afraid to eat fat. That's a whole other issue. But when they're eating fat and then not breaking it down, we're really struggling there. So absorption is my favorite thing to look at GI map, and typically hormone issues start there, to be honest.
Yeah. No, and it does matter, because I think sometimes, and this is kind of how I like to approach things, right? We can talk about all the food, we can talk about all the supplements, whatever. If you're not absorbing this stuff, then we already have an issue. It's kind of like putting, I forget who said this, it might have been Ryan Monahan. It's like putting, gas into your tank, but there's holes in the tank. So obviously it's just going to drip out. You're not going to get everything that you need. It's not a perfect analogy, because I'm sure you're still going to get some food. Otherwise you wouldn't be alive. But it's good enough. Like, it makes sense. Like, you might be eating the quote unquote perfect diet, but if we don't heal the stuff that needed to be healed so that you can actually absorb this stuff, that's a huge issue. I think a lot of people too don't understand the whole relationship between cholesterol, the sex hormones, fat, the sun as well. The sun's a huge thing. So I think everyone is very, especially the older they are, very still much worried about these cholesterol markers. And, I got to be careful what I say on here. I'm not saying that you want excessively high cholesterol. I'm saying that when I do my blood work personally, I'm looking at my triglycerides relative to the cholesterol stuff. I'm looking at how much time I'm actually spending outdoors in the sun so that I can make stuff with this cholesterol. And I'll just put it this way, I'm not particularly worried about it. And you're well read, so you're probably familiar with the certain studies. I think one of them was out of Japan. It was a meta-analysis actually that showed slightly higher cholesterol levels than what we've accepted in America were actually linked to better health long-term. Kind of interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think all of that is so important, especially for women who just think that we want to lose fat all the time, where actually fat is protective both internally and externally sometimes. And while you were speaking too, just another marker that I think why I mentioned like the beneficial bacteria being low is another trend. I think how I would interpret that, and how I do interpret that, is going hand in hand with absorption of carbohydrates and blood sugar management as well. And so if people are low, which is a typical thing that I would see low in things like Akkermansia and Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes and all these things, their glucose control is going to be out of whack also, which goes hand in hand again with the best diet could be causing inflammation or not being absorbed. And then typically we're seeing things like PCOS, which is kind of based in insulin resistance, come up even starting at that tiny microscopic gut level. So yeah, so much you can see. We could go on and on.
I was about to say, if we can continue nerding out here, this is great. I will say I didn't want to miss the comment. So Holistic Health Center was Nikki. We had actually met at Wise Traditions Conference last October. So hello, Nikki. Congratulations on graduating. That's awesome. I love that happened today. One thing that you brought up, Allie, that doesn't come up nearly enough on this show, only typically because we focus a lot on the foundationals, but I think this is super interesting. You mentioned the organic acids testing and methylation. And so I think this is actually maybe not the organic acids test itself, but methylation is something that people who aren't in our space, but go on Dr. Google and YouTube University,
Yes.
they actually end up finding, because there's way too many practitioners and doctors out there that will say, oh, it's MTHFR. That's the only thing that it is. And it's always funny when I go to like family parties and stuff, because I have a lot of aunts that are in their 40s and 50s. And so they love this and they mean well and they're asking genuine questions. But they'll walk up to me, they'll like, one literally did this 2 Christmases ago, like, oh, I think I have MTHFR. I think that's my problem. And it's like, well, that could be an aspect of what you're
Maybe.
dealing with, but it's never just, I mean, my gosh, even if you did have that, it's never just that. So can we talk about methylation issues, what those even are, and how they would relate to this topic of infertility for women?
Yeah, I actually really do like this topic because it's something that's been newer in my arsenal of education, but something that I didn't realize I actually was focusing on without knowing I was focusing on it for a long time by focusing on liver health. And to be honest, I think the liver is probably my favorite organ if we have favorite organs in the body, but
Everyone has favorite organs, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really where I start with a lot of people because when you're talking about methylation, so how I explain methylation to my clients is like the breakdown and usability of the things that we ingest. So converting energy from the food that we put in. And yes, the MTHFR gene is super substantial and it's really common. But what's actually surprising, a lot of people do call me up and are like, I think this is my problem. Exactly what you're saying. Like, this is it. This is the one problem. And we end up running tests, and first of all, they don't have the gene, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they still don't struggle with methylation. You don't have to have that gene to have kind of this poor breakdown and usability of your food from a stressed out liver, stressed out gallbladder, poor stomach acid, all these factors that kind of tie into it. And so yeah, I would say focusing a lot, especially for fertility, because we don't want to go into pregnancy being deficient in things like B vitamins, which would be the output of having that genetic issue or having methylation issue, is very important for me. That I kind of use it as a foundational lab because my niche is infertility, because I do think it's such a big component. That's not to say that it's a foundational lab for the general population, but a lot of my clients are taking prenatals that have unmethylated forms of B vitamins or unmethylated forms, or they're taking methylated forms and still not absorbing them well. And so looking deeper with that organic acids is really helpful. But I would say overall methylation for the general public who don't struggle or don't have that gene is still focusing on liver health, honestly.
Yeah. And so for those that don't fully get this, if you have these methylation issues and then you're taking these unmethylated, B vitamins, that can actually, it can make do more harm than good. There was a gentleman, I don't know that I fully buy this, but I thought it was an interesting theory. He believed a lot of the postpartum depression was actually because people start taking folic acid and stuff afterwards.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm not saying it's wrong completely. I think it's very interesting. I don't know if that's every case of postpartum depression, as he kind of suggested when I listened. But I thought that was so funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because if you look at the percentage of the population that supposedly has methylation issues, and then you look at the percentage that have these postpartum depression symptoms, it's kind of, correlation is not causation, right? But it was interesting enough. And then, we're loading people up on prenatals, but also, they're getting other stuff after they have the baby. And so it's like, whoa, what the heck are we doing? And then I learned that it's sprayed on our food too. We'll spray folic acid on a lot of things in the United States. I know you guys don't have that in your homestead, which thank God for that. But the rest of us out here, there's people that have these methylation issues that they'll never know about, most likely, unless they work with someone like us. And even then, not everyone is doing that type of testing, for better or for worse. It's not necessarily a foundational lab, depending on, again, your clientele. I totally agree with you that it can be, though. Mm-hmm. And so they're eating this stuff, they're trying to do well, and they just get sicker and sicker and sicker. Right. And it's because they're not getting the right forms of what they needed.
Exactly. And I actually just had a client who, like, literally this week, I went over one of her labs. She's taking so many pills right now, and her organic acids test came back deficient in pretty much every single thing she's taking. And I don't think it's an issue that she needs to take more. I think it means that her body is not breaking down and using that well. And so we have to take a far step back and be like, all right, how can we get your body to stop running on stress mode so it actually can focus on rest and digest, produce enough stomach acid, all of these things, all the gut factors. It's so complex. But it was a huge testimony to me that, like, those over supplementation, if you don't know how your body's actually processing things and using things, is really a waste of time and money and could actually be causing inflammation. So
Yeah. I don't want to because I didn't see this in your bio. I don't want to put you on the spot with this topic if this isn't something that you focus on. But I'm curious because this all has to do with to me with the hormonal stuff, stress, sleep. I'm curious to what degree you talk about with your clients, if at all, like light and circadian rhythm,
yeah.
because this was something. I mean, one, I'm still obsessed with it, but I was really, really obsessed with it 5, 6 years ago, and it was like the first thing I would make people do. Now, for privacy's sake, I won't mention name, but there was this person in a similar friend group, and we traveled twice together, basically in a 6 month span. Now, I was working with her too, so she's very open with me about the stuff she was dealing with. She's a couple years older, and she worked in a way normally that she was up at 5. So no matter what time of year
Mhm.
where we live, like there was never sunrise then. Goes to the office, is there all day, goes to the gym afterwards, like was never in light. Now, when we went on these 2 trips, one was in July, one was in November. The only 2 times since she had gotten off birth control a year before the July marker. So just to be clear, because it's kind of confusing. Let's say it's not these dates, but
Mhm.
July of 2022 to July of 2023, she got off birth control in 2022. Never had anything going on till 2023. This is a 20-something-year-old woman.
Okay.
Then we go on the trip, and now if you're hanging out with Ev, we're waking up at sunrise, we're going outside, we're doing hiking. And then she messaged me after she got back. She's like, I didn't want to say this on the trip, but I didn't want to be weird, but I started, like, I had my cycle when we were doing that. And then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's just a fluke, whatever. 3 months goes by, nothing. November, next trip, same thing happens. Now, we're not talking like
Mhm.
full out ready to go, right? I don't want to be graphic,
Yeah.
but she's like, I have not had anything happen with this in literally at that point, November, a year and change. And the only 2 times were when she was on a vacation, which you think is a lot chiller time too, and getting outside every single day. So again, correlation's never causation, but it's a
Right.
hell of a coincidence. So
Yeah.
long-winded way of saying, is that something that you work on with your clients at all?
Totally. I think it's a huge piece of it. So I don't specifically give them, I do have them track their sleep. Like a
Mm,
lot of them have, either an Apple Watch or a Mira or
right, right.
yeah, a ring or a ring, all those things. And if they don't, I have like a sleep track record that they fill out every
Mm,
morning, like how many times they woke up, all the things. Because I do think sleep is just so huge when it comes to hormones. It's huge for everything, right? It's that whole rest and digest. We have to actually like build up the body when we're sleeping. So I do recommend to all of my clients, like you have to see the sun at least 15 minutes a day. And I do recommend, I call it the sunset challenge. And so I'm like, see either and typically sunset's easier for people than sunrise. So
mhm.
they can pick either seeing the sunrise or seeing the sunset, but I would say at least see one of them every day. And actually kind of reset, yeah, the circadian pattern. And I do think that makes such a huge difference. And I love that you saw that, and I do think you're right. Like there could be multiple factors. Was her stress lower? Being on vacation and then seeing the sunshine, I think just yeah, physically does something different
Yeah.
to our
Yeah, there's multiple. This is what's odd. There's multiple clients that, because again, it's something I always recommend. It's like,
body.
just personally, if they come to me, they already know they're having to do this. I'm like, I don't care if you got to set the alarm for the first 2 weeks. We're just
Mhm.
doing this. So it's 30 minutes outside every single day in the morning. You find your app. What's sunrise time? We're going out then. Personally, that's just
I
what we're
love
doing. I've
that.
never
Yeah.
worked with someone in Alaska, to be fair, so maybe that'd be different. But where I work and where I live, that usually works. I've seen other people that hadn't had, a cycle maybe in 8 months, right? Or they're not
Mhm.
aware of one. They do it for 2 weeks, bam, comes back. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really, and it's not even as odd as it seems. We're just talking about being outside. This was the
Right.
default. Like this was the default at one point. I'm sure you and your husband get to be out all the time, right? Because taking care of everything.
We let out the chickens at sunrise. Yes, we
There you
do.
go. Perfect.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's cool. I will take that note and run with that because I do focus on either one or the other, sunset or sunrise. But I wonder how much even a step further it would be to have the sunrise, like set your
Sure.
mind ready for the day. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
With that said, I want to talk about some, client progressions or testimonials, people that you're working on. Only one question before that, just so I always am balanced and fair on these episodes of infertility. Do you have any insight? Maybe it's not your wheelhouse, but actually, I have a better way to word it. At what point are you working with a woman and maybe things are still not going right, and then you start to wonder, okay, well, is the partner here the one that
Sure.
actually has more of the infertility issues? And it's not to say that the woman couldn't have worked on stuff too. I get it, but maybe she's doing all these things right now, and you're like, what's going on? Yes, guys, men can be infertile too. It doesn't feel that way sometimes, but yes, we
Yeah.
can. So when do you look at that?
Yeah. So I used to work with men and women, and then since last April, kind of decided that women were my thing and made available only to women. But if I'm working with a couple that is obviously, like, I ask a ton of questions about the man's health as well. They're also invited to be in that session, the first session or the result session as well, so they can glean off of all the knowledge I'm giving to their wife. And there's a lot of things that, or their partner, and a lot of things that I will tell them, this is not just specific for her body. This is also something you can do. Also, when I mentioned that liver cleanse that I do, I actually have both partners do it and just kind of have this disclaimer of like, you're not my client, but this is something like take it or leave it, self-help, that you can do as well. And kind of explain why. Like, you're exactly right that men can be infertile as well. Also, the strength of sperm and the sperm quality greatly impacts, especially the first 12 weeks of not only conception, but then that first trimester. Implantation, the actual growth of the embryo, the safety of that first trimester is greatly influenced by the sperm health as well. And so them focusing on things like we're talking about, like even sunshine, lowering stress for the man is huge, not over exercising for them. I talk a lot about blood sugar balance for the man as well. I see a lot of guys and a lot of partners that just eat one meal a day and then fast, completely. And when we're talking about fertility, I'm not against fasting. I think it can be done in really healthy, great times. But when we're talking about fertility, having a really stable blood sugar is really key also, but even for the man. So eating breakfast before you have coffee, like simple changes that you don't have to be my client necessarily to get a handout and some explanation of how you can better your body and promote fertility on your end too. So yeah, very important.
We gotta shout that out, because it's it's kind of odd to think about the fact that a male can be, fertile pretty much his whole life. Like, we can do this into our 70s or 80s, which is very odd, again, to think about what that means. But at the same time, I think all the blame typically goes to the women. When we think about these issues with infertility, I think they take it more seriously, just like the autoimmune issues and the other health issues we mentioned. So if you're a guy out there and, someone in your life is struggling with this, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves too. And again, it's just going to have better success for the baby, right? I think I'm so big on this, even as someone who I don't have any plan right now to have kids per se, but I'm so big on making sure that we're honoring this innocent being that people are bringing into this world, right? We want them to have as many chances as possible. So, why not get as healthy as we can beforehand?
And the genetics that you pass down, we know so much about,
Yes.
like, you have a genetic code, but then there's this epigenetic factor of how we can influence the expression of our genes. And so you have half of those genes, right, to pass on. So you want to give the best genetic code and the best expression of those genes possible to that baby. So yeah, there's also just to finish out that note, there's great at-home sperm tests to do that I actually really recommend all of my fertility clients to do. And I don't run them through me, but you can do them even Prove and Burden Bee, at home sperm kits that for men who are shy and don't want to talk about these things because it's vulnerable and don't want to go to a doctor, they can just do it from the comfort of their home and kind of see where they are. So that's always helpful.
What a time to be alive, right? So yeah, check it out. Why not do it beforehand? We got to get a sponsorship for that one. That's good. With that said, so as we begin to wrap up here a little bit, I love to talk about client testimonials in general, and client journeys, even we can call it, especially in this topic. It is, again, I don't even have a desire for this right now. I haven't experienced this. I can't even imagine the feelings that go through, a potential mom and dad's minds, especially the mom, when they've been struggling with this. They know there's this time limit, and then bam, hey, it finally happens. So I'm just curious, to the degree that you're able to share for privacy's sake, are there any cool stories yet of people going through and working with you, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're pregnant?
Yes. I mean, I have a bunch of them. I'm so thankful for them. Because I really it's vulnerable for me as well, because I become attached and just love my clients so much and walk through this journey with them and see how much they want to be parents, and how you're exactly right. It is such an ache in their hearts, to become parents. And typically when they find me, they've been already through the IVF journey potentially, or they've been struggling with fertility for years. I'm hoping to change that now. I'm hoping that maybe this podcast will say, if you're just starting out the journey, you can take preventative steps instead of reactive. But so I just in the past 6 months, I've had 8 women who have had over a year of infertility become pregnant. And that's truly just because we're doing these simple things. Like I always say I'm not magic. Like I'm just looking at data and we're pulling apart all these things, the whole dress protocol. We're looking at diet, we're looking at rest, we're looking at exercise, we're looking at stress. Like, I mean, it's just really getting back to the basics of health and foundation, and their bodies feel better. Like they're not just only becoming pregnant, they're actually seeing, they're having a bowel movement every day. They're not having headaches. They're not having this reaction to food anymore. So there's all these things as the body comes back into homeostasis and just in a better, state. They're prioritizing then reproduction, and that's when it happens. And typically, so I offer 3-month or 6-month packages, and pretty much I would say 90% of my fertility clients become pregnant within 3 months, which is wild to me. But yeah, and then the people that take longer, and I still have a few, and I want to be sensitive to the few that have taken longer and are, a year into their health journeys with me. We're making progress, we're unraveling all these things, but these are women that have more things like diagnosed ovarian failure or severe like cystic ovaries, things like that just take longer and take time to heal, but there's still so much hope there. And again, we're not making fertility our main goal, but along the way we're peeling back all these layers of health to get them feeling their best and functioning their best to prioritize reproduction.
Yeah, right. I mean, fertility is almost the byproduct here of doing all the other health stuff. And so it's kind of interesting because on one sense, we started off this conversation today talking about how this makes total sense. When the body is under stress, it's not going to be able to do this. Now, at the same time, the body also wants to get pregnant, and male body want to get women bodies pregnant, right? Like that's just how this goes. So it's not like you can't be under any stress. The issue is that we are, and guys, we've all been here too. Allie's been here. I've been here. We're so off the mark in today's world for how we should be living that when you come to someone like us, like you just said, it's really not magic. It's just, you don't know what you're missing out on. You have no idea that you're not doing the most basic stuff for your health. I mean, you're staying up till 3 a.m. on the weekends. Then you try to sleep a little better on the weekdays. You have a job you hate. You're in a relationship you don't like. You're drinking Coca-Cola. It's like, the fact that anyone can even survive like this is actually just a testament to our resiliency as human beings, right? It explains why we've been here for so long. I mean, but my goodness, like it doesn't take that much for most people. And I appreciate your respect towards those that might take, a lot more. Some people are very sick. There's a lot going on and there's layers to it. It's like an onion peeling it back. Absolutely wonderful. I'll ask you I hope it's not too funny of a question. I'm genuinely curious about this because I've had such mixed results with the people who have come on the show in 300 something episodes and talked about fertility. This is not saying go try this at home per se, but I guess this is what I'll say. We all know in the functional medicine space that any standard that Western medicine has set for the most part, it's like pretty much we can do better in the functional space. And I don't mean that the Western doctors are saying that on purpose or doing something bad. Like that system's just inherently flawed because it's working with a bunch of people living in our modern world. So one of the things, for example, that's always said is, hey, man, you're 40. Like maybe it's time to they'll just tell you to give up basically at that point, even if they thought you were healthy. And we have had testimonies on this show, for better or for worse, I'm not arguing the right or wrong of it, of people in their early 40s. I mean, they had a totally healthy pregnancy. Like nothing's wrong with the kid, nothing wrong with the mom, everything good. So again, my weird question here is, what do you think, if you have an opinion on this, what do you think the upper limit actually is? Because really the only thing we know is that Western medicine's wrong. But do you think, or have you seen people in their 40s yet just doing this and getting their fertility back and being fine?
I myself have not had older than 40. But I don't know if there is an upper limit as far as we can promote healthy ovulation. I went to a seminar years ago through Standard Process, which I just have gleaned so much knowledge from them, but about how really if we can just prioritize ovulation as long as possible, we we promote health for women. So it's like anti-aging, it's reproductive, it's, all the things that are working well in the body. And so I would say if we can keep women cycling longer, I think the standard age for menopause right now from the medical perspective is way too young. Like we accept menopause way too early. And in reality, I think it's because the body is not prioritizing reproduction because of all these other things, right? And instead, if we can keep women cycling longer by promoting just overall health, I think the upper limit is, maybe 10 years past what we think it is.
I see that.
That's my theory, but I would say, yeah, if we can prioritize ovulation and reproduction through health, then we have the sky's the
Yeah.
limit.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving a direct answer with that because it's hard to say, right? I mean, that's one of the
Yeah.
more controversial things to say, but I'll never forget we had Dr. Amatma Simmons on probably back in episode 70 or 80. And she referenced, I got to pull this up so people don't think I'm crazy with this. I swear this is real. You can go to the podcast. She referenced this tribe that was known to be having, the women were having kids up until 60. And it's like,
Wow.
no, I'm not advocating for this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just,
Yeah.
anyone would tell you in today's world that's impossible. There's no reality where you can do that. And it's like, well, no, it's not impossible. They're doing it. Of course, you could argue, well, that's maybe a very specific strain of genes. Maybe. I think what happened there is these people hadn't been touched by the bad things that happen in our
Right.
modern
Yeah.
world. And I think your 10-year thing makes a lot of sense because there is kind of this weird thing of, all right, a lot of women go through menopause, let's say around 50. And then at 40, we're kind of saying, oh, don't even try to have a kid. It's like, what happened for those 10 years there? I think that's
Right.
the 10-year
Yeah.
gap that we're missing out on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are stats too, and I know we're running out of time, but there's stats about other like societies and like the world's healthiest populations where menopause like timeline is actually 10 years further than what we see in our American culture. And so let's not accept that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Have babies at 55. Let's go, guys.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. I'm going to get sued. All right, Allie, with that said, awesome show today. I feel like there's so many little things here that, you know what, if someone's clicking on this, especially on YouTube, maybe they don't even know anything about us, let alone functional medicine. And they're listening to this thinking like, okay, I don't get all this, but hopefully it inspires hope in them. That's one of my main jobs in the show is just to hope that people realize that there is hope. There's so many different things they have not tried because there's hundreds of things out there to get this done. And the way that I look at the people who specialize or fully niche out in infertility is you guys are like the best investment ever. You can make arguments sometimes. People are like, well, I could take this medication or I could do FDN type stuff. And yeah, the labs cost money and functional medicine isn't cheap. I get that. But IVF and all these things, these are way, way more, 10x more than we would ever charge as an FDN. So it truly is an investment, not only in your health, but it's again, I always got to be careful with wording, especially as we get bigger. It is probably the better option for some people, and they would have saved a lot of money and saved their health.
It might be significantly more affordable. Yes.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So,
Yes.
Allie, where can they find you if they would like to work with someone like you to get these issues under control?
Yes. So through my website, I schedule free 15-minute phone consultations to talk about your questions, all the things. My website is offbeatholisticfdn.com. And it's, of course, beet, B-E-E-T, like the vegetable, because I love a good food pun. So that would be first place. You can set up a free 15-minute consult. You can also email me through there. And that would be first step. I'm also on social media at Offbeat Holistic FDN. And then you can email me as well. And all that contact is on both locations.
Sweet. Well, the signature question on the show, my friend, we're about to do it. So we've been talking about infertility a lot. We're just going general now and, you know, kind of stealing from your years in nutrition, holistic health, functional medicine, and seeing what you come up with. So if we could give you a magic wand and Allie waves it and gets every single one of us to do one thing for our health, whether that's literally do one thing or you get us to stop doing one thing, what's the one thing that you get us to do, my friend?
Ooh, I know we talked about sunshine a lot. I'm going to say sunshine. See the sun, get outside, enjoy life. I think whatever you can do to actually like sit and bask in the sun, metaphorically and literally, enjoy your life, focus on the beautiful things that we are offered. Your health is going to change.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.